Shalom and welcome to the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. Looking today at Jeremiah chapter 8, verse 2, a continuation of getting toward the end of this long and very gruesome picture of the devastation that's coming upon the people, with the dead bodies at the end of chapter 7, and in verse 1 of chapter 8, the bones of those who are buried will actually be brought out. And what's going to happen to those bones as a final indignation, that's what we'll read here. So let's read the text in Hebrew as we get started. It's not too difficult, but a little bit long. Ushtachum leshemesh ve'layareach ulkol tzeva hashemayim asher ahivum ve'asher avadum ve'asher halku acharechem ve'asher darashum ve'asher hishtachavu lahem lo ya'asafu ve'lo yikaveru ledomen al penei ha'adama yihyu. Wow, that's quite a mouthful. Not easy to read through. Well, what do we have here at the beginning? This is going to be a vav, and it's going to be a vav consecutive, and it's going to be attached. Be careful, this is going to be actually a suffix here. So you see this u is a formative. So what we have here is this is a perfect, and it's continuing it's a perfect consecutive, so it's continuing the imperfect from the previous verses about what's going to happen in the future. And this is a third common plural, and it's kal from the verb shatach. And shatach has the sense of to spread out, to spread around someplace else, and with a suffix, and this is just a mem suffix, so it's a 3mp. So, and they will spread them. So someone else obviously is going to be doing this, but they will spread them, and the them refers to the bones of the people. Now, the bones is actually feminine, so you could technically expect a third feminine plural, but it's not unusual for the masculine to sort of override that, and it may be a more general concept of the bones of all the people. So the concept of the people with their bones combining together to give you the more neutral masculine pronoun suffix here. So that's what we're going to find. Actually, we're going to find it all the way through this verse here. So they will spread them out to the, and there's your article there with your little dagish right there, to the sun, and to the, same thing here, yareach, that's the moon, and for all the host, Tseva, you're used to seeing that, Tsevaot, the Lord of hosts, here it's a singular, all the army or the host of, this is construct, of the heavens. So in this context here with the sun and the moon, this is probably referring to stars. Sometimes it can have other senses as well, but in this context here it's referring to the stars, all the stars of heaven, which they have loved. Now, what do we have here? This again is this is a perfect, not a perfect consecutive. There's no vav at the beginning because this is looking back to the past. It's a third common plural. It's a kal from ahav, meaning to love, and with a suffix here, which is the 3mp suffix. But in this case here, the suffix is actually referring to the sun, the moon, and the stars. And the subject of the verb here, is the people. The people who are doing the spreading out are not the same people. They're spreading out bones, but now it's the people's bones, so to speak. It's the people themselves who loved these things. And so now their bones are being spread out to those same things, which they loved them and which they served them. Same thing over here, perfect third person, third common plural, to kal, and with the verb to serve. And you have this sort of a resumptive pronoun in both these cases, which they serve them, which they love them, which they serve them, and which they walked after them. So we would say whom they served, or whom they loved, whom they served, and after whom they walked. And this is all referring to the people's sins. And whom they sought. Now, once again, perfect, third common plural. This is a kal from the verb darash, which means to seek after. Has this nuance of seeking to inquire, to seek counsel with someone. So to whom they sought, or to whom they applied for counsel. That's sort of an idea. So this is condemning all the people's actions against the gods, the idolatry of the starry host, and whom they bow down to them. So here's a very famous verb. Once again, this is a perfect. It's a perfect third common plural with this u ending on it, and it's from our verb chava. Used to sing this one, usually called the hishtafel, and the final hey drops off here, and so all of this is sort of the prefix of it, the hishtafel. Again, there's debate about this, and the older grammars used to see it as a hithpael of a different verb, but it's actually probably a hishtafel, and this is the only verb in that conjugation that uses that particular stem. And so, which they bow down to them, to whom they bow down. Now, this is sort of changing the topic now, and they will not be gathered. There's a negation, and here we have, with the vav, yod at the beginning, u at the end, we have an imperfect. So it's going to be an imperfect third masculine plural. And be careful, this is a nifal, because you have this comet underneath the first consonant of the root. You would normally have a dagesh in here for the nun, but it's rejected, and so you lengthen this one into a full sere over here. So this is a nifal, and asaf means to gather, so in the nifal it means to be gathered. And they will not be gathered. Now the they subject here is probably referring back to the bones of the people in this more general neuter sense that we saw way back at the beginning. They will be spread out, and they will not be gathered, and they will not be. Well, what is this? This again is an imperfect, third masculine plural. It's a nifal again. You see the commas, you see the dagesh for the nifal this time, and the regular hirik underneath. And third, as I said, third masculine plural. They will not be gathered, and they will not be buried. So the bones will be left there exposed. And now we start the last thought of the phrase here. For domen, this is a word which means dung. It's always used of corpses. This is rejected bodies, decaying bodies, like excrement almost. It's only used 6 times in the Old Testament, 4 of which are in Jeremiah. And for dung upon the surface of this is in construct here, upon the surface of the ground, they will be. So yod with an u at the end. It's just an imperfect third masculine plural. Kal from our verb haya. But remember, haya with a lamed, and here's your lamed over here, has this nuance of become. So they will become dung upon the surface of the ground. So these bones are not going to be gathered up again. They're not going to be buried. They're just going to be left there to rot and to turn back into dung and fertilizer in the future. This is the ultimate indignity when a person's bones cannot even be secure in the grave. So it's a very, very, very severe judgment that we see here. Well, let's hide our work here, and we're going to have to hide this and squeeze our text down a little bit and look at a couple of translations. First of all, the ESV, which is going to be very literal, and they shall be spread before the sun and the moon and all the host of heaven, referring to the bones of the people, which they, the people, have loved when they were alive, obviously, and served, which they, the people, have gone after, and which they have sought, for darash up here, and worshipped, bow down to them. And they shall not be gathered or buried. They shall be as dung on the surface of the ground. Very literal translation, but a very accurate translation at the same time. Christian Standard Bible, just because this is so long and there's so much repetition, they've actually combined it. It makes it a little bit easier to read and smooths it out just a little bit. But all the ideas are there. They will be exposed, spread before. They will be exposed to the sun, the moon, and all the stars in the sky, all the hosts of heaven, all the stars in the sky, which they have loved, served, followed. Now the they here is referring to the people when they were alive. Remember, the they over here is referring to the bones of the people, which they have loved, served, followed, consulted, and worshipped. So they've kind of just combined these and it's sort of just condensed it a little bit. Their bones will not be, so they repeated that, their bones will not be collected and buried, but will become like manure on the soil surface. A very, very, very sad and devastating ending, especially with the ancient peoples, in the Jewish culture in particular, of having one's bones just left to decay upon the surface of the ground. But that is the result, the final result of what the prophet is announcing, the consequences of their sin. So So the Lord has one more verse where he's going to apply this in verse 3. We'll see that next time. And then he's going to begin changing subjects and moving on to something else. So check back with us soon as we continue working through this text in the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. Shalom.